So because my time is limited, I must really get into these things. So I'm just going to start. And I'm going to start with the first question I was going to ask him. And so when he comes on, he can help me greatly. But number one, as we approach another season for primary elections, as a rule, voter turnout is typically very low. Why is that? Well, I think that probably a number of you would be able to answer that question. I think a lot of times we're engaged in different ways. There's not necessarily anybody that we're necessarily really excited about, or we don't know very much about them either. Chris, can you speak in the other room? And so it's a challenge sometimes to, they're limited on their finances to be able to get that word out there. But with some exceptions, there are those that can make a great case, even in the primary. That's certainly is one of the important aspects of it. But something that I have become increasingly aware of is that it is actually the primary elections that oftentimes are the most important. And if you think about some of the races that have been races across the country, there have been some particular individuals that are really very strong conservatives and Christian in world and life view, and have demonstrated that faith by their walk and their tenacity. But because of the fact that they're not the incumbent, they just the turnout is not there, and so that the better candidate loses to the incumbent, who perhaps has been there really quite a period of time, has been more of a placekeeper than a mover and a shaker. So that is a real concern. Our primary election, I believe, Austin, I see you there. Shake your head yes if I'm right, is August 4. Is that correct? August 4 is the primary in Michigan. And I think there's some people out of state here, but it is August 4. So that's coming really soon. So anyway, even as we consider the different candidates running wherever, certainly in our state, it's really important that we take a very, very close look at the candidates that are before us. And so I could name names, but that's really not the purpose of this event or this time. But we do have the opportunity to look and check around. One of the places that you can look is ivoter.com. ivoter.com. That has become quite familiar, and it's nationwide. And if you go to ivoter.com, it will walk you through or lead you through the details. But it starts off with the national campaigns for whether it's state senators or congressmen at the local level, and more than that. So there's been thorough vetting of those candidates, and you can look and see who has supported them, where they have put their own money, what corporations or what figures or nonprofits have supported them or even contributed to their campaigns. Again, the incumbents have a greater record of that than those that are just the challengers. But nonetheless, there is effort to try to find what the challengers' background is as best as they can have it. So that being said, it's ivoter.com. Now, another thing I'd like to say about ivoter.com is they are looking for some volunteers at this very time. And this is a great opportunity for me to say that. I don't think Chuck is on yet, right, Chris? The reason why I'm saying that is 4 years ago, I served as a panelist on ivoter.com. It's as the primary is done and you move towards the general election, they have panelists in different regions of the country. And so I volunteered to be a panelist, which is basically that like in our case, there were like 3 so-called panelists. And you go through, you look at their web link where the research has already been done. It's all there. All the details are there. And also they have a general rating as to whether they're very conservative, moderately, and then or liberal, mostly liberal, and so on. So, but the panelists are really the final determinant of that. So they on their own spent about 10 hours over a couple week period of time weeding through all the information and coming up with their own conclusion, very conservative or liberal or whatever. And then as panelists, you come together, and then the three of you, in the case of our experience 4 years ago, you then discuss and chew on it. Maybe one thinks this and another person thinks that. And then you just come to a point where you come to an agreement. So it takes some effort, but sadly, I'm hearing from iVoter.com, and they're saying we are desperately in need of people to assist us. So therefore, I'm just saying, if any of you would be willing to volunteer into a capacity like that, please let me hear from you. You can email me at my email address, which is bjohnson@americandecency.org, bjohnson@americandecency.org, and then I will forward this over to a lady by name of Lori, who works on the national level. So that would be great. Is he on? Okay, Chuck is on, and Chuck, can I hear you?
Yes, I hear you.
All right, Chuck, you're on phone. We can't see your face, but you are with us, and
Okay.
and we are blessed. So, Chuck, praise the Lord, you're with us. I did give some information about your background a bit, your business owner, PhD, and the fact that you'd run for city council, and that you're very experienced in many, many areas. So, because of our short time, with me having the opportunity to do a meditation for a funeral, I've answered one of the questions that I laid out there. We're going to move right ahead. I gave some thoughts, Chuck, regarding why it is that there's a low voter turnout typically across the nation in our areas. Now we're going to move to a second question, and Chuck.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm sorry to be moving so forward. The time is so important, obviously.
Okay.
But I want to just say, Chuck, it's been great getting to know you, and I appreciate your heart for Christ and for activism. But here's the question, Chuck. It's often true that the primaries are overlooked, and that the incumbent oftentimes is a shoe-in, while the challenger is the one with sometimes with fire in his or her belly. That's not given a fair shake. Why is that? And is there anything that can be done to level the playing field?
Yeah, certainly there is. Well, first of all, thanks for hosting me today, and I apologize for not getting through on Zoom. So, but with that said, let's just move forward. Looking at why the incumbency has an advantage is because the incumbency has all the workings of government to help them, to assist them. First of all, they have the ability to send out flyers right before an election. Well, that is a big campaign advantage. Give me an example. Recently, we had one. We had 3 flyers in 30 days, which you and I pay for. Well, that gives the advantage to the incumbent because they can do that in the name of giving or communicating with their constituency. So that's one advantage. The other advantage is that within and I will speak strictly on the GOP because that's what I'm familiar with. The GOP will help assist in campaigns. They will go door to door, the other representatives that do not have races will assist. Now, it's generally thought that they do not get involved in primaries, but that is really not true. They do get involved in a number of ways, and this is one of them. And the other is they also have PACs available where they will send out information not associated with any particular candidate, but they do. They run it that way. So that's 2 different ways. They draft resolutions that really are meaningless in terms of effectivity. They're really like, if you hear HR, House resolution, they really there's no enforcement and no reason to do bills. And oftentimes in election year, just like this year, you find that there are a number of HRs issued to make it look like they are doing something. And I'm not saying they're not doing anything. I'm just saying they make it look like they're not doing, that they're doing something. Some are and some are not. And when I say not not doing anything, I mean effective legislation. We all have priorities. And so when you hear something like they issued an HR this just recently on encouraging cities to not defund the police, well, that's kind of foolishness. Why not pass a bill that says, if you shall reduce your police force or reduce your budget, that we will take away your grants or all your grants. In other words, be like a parent and tell them, hey, you can't do that. That's not right. Okay, so that's another way. Use drafting resolutions. They also get incumbents get advantages of endorsements from agencies, and agencies, or not agencies, but organizations will tend to endorse an incumbent over a challenger because they say they know the incumbent, which I have to tell you that's not true. I will tell you that, and I will actually stand before anyone that says that, because there's not an in-depth analysis done of the individuals, which leads to the discussion, Bill, you and I have had of what I'm looking to do down the road is vetting candidates from a lower level on up, because that's where your ground game comes from. Another thing, incumbents, an advantage an incumbent gets is because their visibility, because they're doing things in the community, they get more visibility than, say, a challenger. You know, I want to say the bully pulpit, so to speak. That's what they really have an advantage. And then the last one would be the incumbents also working directly with the township officials and whatnot. It's almost a built-in given that they will go the entire time of their, unless they mess up.
Chuck, now,
Okay.
you know, as I was as you're going through that, I thought of another thing too. Now, this is probably not necessarily true at the lower levels, but we certainly see it true at the federal level, and that is where there can be a really strong candidate who might even have had some background, say like Attorney General, you know, or or U.S. Senator running for a race in a state, say like Virginia. But the Republican Party, you know, we're all familiar with the so-called Rhino Republicans in name only, whatever you want to call them. They're basically placeholders and have learned how to make personal profits from their time there, and so they're not in favor of that. I guess I'll use the word Tea Party kind of a guy or person who really has some strong background and shows that the person is a doer and an activist, and so that person is really the one that is in a position and is really very supported by a large number of people, but the party itself is against this person. That person might even be the incumbent, but if there's another person that represents more the do nothing, you know, big business, big government, even not necessarily pro-life, they can throw all their power, their weight behind the one that meets their Rhino needs, and not give a penny to the one that really is a deserving candidate. I don't think I explained that very well, but help me with that if you.
You did it very well. Actually, I will. And you're talking and specifically about a guy named Ken Cuccinelli in that case, but there are many others. What you're really indicating is the system itself, the structure, the organizational structure, is such that a challenger is almost like in a title fight boxing match. He would have to go for a knockout in order to even win, because it's set up against him. In other words, the status quo. It's the good old boys club. Once they're there, someone coming in with new ideas might rock the boat. A few years ago, a guy named the head of Procter & Gamble wrote a book, Stop Paddling and Start Rocking the Boat, and that's what he was insisting on. He was talking out in business world, but it applies in life. That so often people get there and they become complacent and they just go along to get along, so to speak. And that's kind of what you're describing occurs at the state level. Well, it actually occurs at all levels, truthfully. It occurs at the local, then at the county, the state, and then on to DC. The organization itself, and I'm going to speak now strictly of the Lansing crowd, they will do things where if you're a challenger, and I'll give you this one right now with a personal hand, they do not want challengers. They do not. And the reason being is that their money is tight, obviously, for anybody. There's always a limited amount. And so they are looking ahead to the governor's race where there's going to spend a lot of money to defeat her, okay, if she's running again. But that's where their money's being spent, and they don't want primary contenders. There are 2 this year in the state of Michigan. I believe there's 2. And that is, even then, they didn't want that. So they will do what they can to thwart that effort. They don't want to spend a lot of money, but they will do what they can to stop it. That is the organization. And once they have the required number of House seats to control the House, they don't care what happens after that. They will leave a candidate. And I mean that sincerely because I can speak the truth on that. It happened to me. They'll pull out. If they've got enough, they let it ride. And that's unfortunate. So a challenger really has to, and even as you pointed out, can have all the credentials in the world. But if they fear that challenger might upset the apple cart, so to speak, with new ideas or things that might challenge the current status quo, they're going to be a little less receptive to help. I don't know, I hope I...
Yes, no, you did very well. Just let me while I mute myself for just a second. I need to ask. Okay, thank you. Anyways, that's very helpful. And now, how can local people, local citizens, now speaking about this matter from a local standpoint, how can people have a sense that this sort of stuff is going on unless they're really people that have their head in the game, they're really trying to sift through the background of these candidates and the party, for example. They really can't, can they, without spending time at it?
That's correct, and that's been one of the pitfalls. If we look in past races, we look historically, we know that the newspaper was always a means that was there. The newspaper provided what we call fact. Today, you think, well, we even have more availability and more ways, and you think we'd have truth. Truth is hard to come by. I mean, it really is, because how do you know you're getting the truth? It's like that philosophical question of what is truth? How do I know it? And truth to us is going back to the Bible, but this would be one area where, or how do we get truth? You pray about it, but do you know if you have truth?
Yeah, it is
a problem. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think one of the situations, that we really face, and we all know that, we've come to such a place, such a point, and I really believe that the evil one and the increasingly a party now that I think it's really fair to say that the Democratic Party is not the Democratic Party of our grandparents or our great grandparents. It is Marxist and it's communist. It's laden full. Anybody that doubts that, and I don't think anybody on this would doubt that, would be Trevor Loudon would just be one resource, but there's many that would indicate that. So, but one of the great problems here is that we're hopeful for good elections, and we put into place the candidates, whether it's the local level or the state level or the national level, and then it seems as though these that look so good on paper and even talk a good game. Once they get there within a very short period of time, they just become, as if they conform to the party leadership, it seems. I think you can speak to that as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. First of all, let's go back. You mentioned about the Democratic Party, and growing up as a Democrat with a father that was a UAW engineer, it's always interesting. But my father today would clearly be a Republican today, because he was a John Kennedy Republican or John Kennedy Democrat. Interesting enough, my brother, who is a UAW member from Howmet days, supports Trump. Now, how is that? After all the things I've spoken about and all this, he's finally realized where this Democratic Party has gone, clearly going south, and that they aren't for the people. They clearly are for communism, as you mentioned.
Mhm.
I like to call it the DIS party now, the Democratic Islamic Socialists. You know how they always talk about dissing somebody? Well, I use that acronym because it is the Democratic Islamic Socialists. The ends justifies the means for these people. Their only interest is to defeat Donald Trump, period, and bring down America as we know it, and reshape it in some way. And Christianity is not part of that goal. And you can see that in everything they do. You might say, well, there's some exceptions. Yep, there's exceptions to every rule. But as a whole, the Democratic Party is truly moving towards a non-Christian approach. The Islamics, of course, we know, and the socialists we know. So taken collectively, they want to bring down the very basis of America, because that's what we were founded on. And it is very, very sad. So when I see this, I get angry, because these guys, you know, they like to tell you that they are right on your game and right with you, but in reality, they're not. They don't change their spots really, but they hide them. You mentioned rhinos, and rhinos is one thing, but Tip O'Neill wrote a book, All Politics is Local, and although he's a Democrat, he describes it very clearly. These people don't change their spots. It's just that they're able to hide them in their covertly, and they get worse when they go at it farther out, because people aren't following. You indicated about how do people follow candidates. Well, they really can't. I shouldn't say that. You can, but an average person doesn't, for many reasons. One of those being family. They don't have time if they work, and the time they come home, they got family time. So, you know, following up on politics, they're assuming their guy is doing the job. They hired him. They assume he's doing the job, but that's not the case, as we're all finding that out.
We are certainly at a time like
Um,
that now, aren't we? And Chuck, at the national level, you know, there's the news day by day pounding away at us by way of MSNBC and CNN and Fox and so forth. And there are people that are following that. But anyway, anybody that wants to have some sense of, you know, there's so much that can be said about the mainstream media is just so heavily biased, strong. And so it's very difficult today for a conservative person, or just a person that just wants to have a sense of what's really going on, as to where to look. You know, now Fox is an alternative, that's for sure. But you know, it's also true that a good portion of the day, they're basically, I'm saying Fox is not really necessarily right leaning. You know, you do have Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham and a few others, and so you certainly can get fed that in that hour of the day. But that being said, though, at the federal level, we see so much that's happening. The buildings getting burned down. You know, the Black Lives Matter, which I'm afraid that still some people really think that that's really what it is all about, is Black Lives Matter. And we know that they themselves have come out. I'm talking about leaders have said, you know, they're Marxist trained. They're Marxist anyway. Let me just finish here now, if I want, because this is all turning into a question. So, you know, that was at the national level. Now, in the state of Michigan, you know, we went through a period of time where Rick Snyder wasn't much of a leader as a Republican, and certainly as a conservative. So we were really damaged. We didn't have a good governor, a good candidate either with Bill Schuette. We thought he should have been, but he wasn't. So here we have Governor Whitmer. And so things have really changed on the state level, more so than
Correct.
ever before in my lifetime. And I'm sure you would say the same. We need to understand what's going on. And I think more and more people are, between her and the Attorney General. So when it comes to local politics, no matter what county it is in our state, and certainly that's true in our region, we need to have a really strong understanding of who is running for representative, our local representative, or who's running for this, or who's running for that. And it isn't enough for them just to be nice people. We need to have them be grounded and people of faith and people of courage. And I'm sure you will echo that and say it the way you would, if you would.
Yeah, let me talk about a race. I won't talk about my race I'm in, but I'll talk about a race that you may or may not know. We're talking about on a U.S. Congress seat the 8th district, which is Livingston County. And when you look at that race, we look at 4 candidates. We got Christina Light, we have Paul Jung, we have Alan Horton, and we have Mike Detmer. Mike Detmer is a conservative. I've met Mike. I followed this race very close. I know the conservatives over there that are working really, really well. Cindy Holland and Vicky Fike, and I know some of the other people over there. Here's the case where you've got Paul Jung, who is a lobbyist, and the actual state GOP is supporting him, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I'll give you the background. Al Horton is a veteran. Al Horton is a good guy. I don't think he's bad, but he has some characteristics that are a little tough to accept. Okay, and Christina is probably a nice person when I know of her, but again, not there. So you have 2 primary runners. You have Mike Detmer and you have Paul Jung. Paul Jung was a lobbyist. Paul Jung didn't live in the state, but the state GOP is supporting him because he brings money. And this is some of the things that happen. So a guy like Mike has to go out and work harder and harder and harder. Truly committed, truly, has the right values, but the work against, he's got some, things stacked up against him a little bit. I don't know how that race is going to come out. I followed it I follow it now over a good year. And it's just, I hope that and pray that Mike Detmer wins, because what Mike Detmer will do affects me. If Paul Jung gets in there, will affect me, because the very thing we're talking about, he's a carpetbagger. He was born here, grew up in California, and then worked as a lobbyist in D.C. And that is not the type of person we need represented, because they don't represent the values, the very values of the area. So I hope that gives you a little insight when we talk about these races. And if I deviated, I'll apologize. But
No, that's fine. I would like to say too, distinguishing features of what really, what to look for in a candidate. We know that, say, like if they come and they knock at our door and they have a flyer and they hand it to us, well, that's nice and that's good. It shows that they seem to want the race anyway, or want that office. It is important to get information about them beyond what's on their little flyer as well. To talk with people that know that individual, know that they have a church affiliation. Know what kind of what kind of marital relationship do they seem to have, or family life do they have? Are they a Christian? Of course. Are they pro-life? I mean, all those things. But here's another one to me that really stands out. If a person, these are different days today. We have Governor Whitmer. It isn't enough just to be kind of voting the party line or going along necessarily with just to get along. Sometimes there really comes a point where a person needs to have fire in their belly in a good sense. And so if you talk with the person running for office and you know about some of the political issues of our day, and you can ask them a question like, say like it's a state representative position. Have you ever, who do you pay attention to the news at the federal level? And if they say, well, kind of, and you ask them a question about, well, have you ever heard of Jim Jordan? Well,
Yes.
never did, or how about Louis Gohmert? No. It's like, whoa, they're not even paying attention to some of the real newsmakers at the highest level that are noted Christians, that in their indignation over what's happening, they stand up, even if they're voted down or never successful in being able to accomplish what they'd like to. But nonetheless, you can see that these people are really fighting for the Constitution and for us. And I think that's something that you can really find out from a person that's running for office.
It's funny because I just did that today. I received a flyer yesterday from a county commissioner. He happens to live across the lake from me. And so I called him up because I want to find out, okay, why are you really running? What's the purpose behind it? I saw the flyer. And then we had to chat. And then I basically was given some tips and things that I see. Well, you mentioned some characteristics earlier, and faith and family. When I look at a flyer, what I want to see is a picture of a family. Why? Because it tells me what the issues are in their own life that they're facing. And if they're facing those, if they have a family, they're going to be looking at it the same way when they deal with things at a county level, at the state level. So those are really important. You mentioned faith. I want to see that there's a church background, that they're well grounded, and that they're going, not just attending, but they're doing a little bit more than just that. That they don't belong necessarily to a mega church, because like I said, I had a son that went to a mega church who left it because it wasn't personal enough. His relationship with God was strong, but he felt he wasn't having that relationship with people, with the body. And so he now belongs to a smaller church, which is, I think, probably much better anyway. So I look for that. I look for the faith. I look for family. I look for honesty. How do you look at honesty? I will ask them some questions. You mentioned about, do you know about Jim Jordan, or do you know Louis Gohmert, or do you know about Matt Getz, or you know about Lindsey Graham, or anyone, any number of them, okay? You can't help but know it if you're watching the news, or even if you watch even the impeachment hearings, you realize who these people are. You mentioned fire in the belly. They have fire in the belly. That's what we look for. And I call it passion. You call it fire in the belly because that's a political term, Bill. But I talk about passion. When I look, and some of you might look at the background, you'll know I coached soccer for so long. When I look at a kid, I look at a kid to see if he has passion. So, and I remember early on someone saying, "Oh, you don't want that kid. He's a handful. He's real trouble." Well, if they're trouble, sometimes you know that they have passion for something, and you then have a challenge to redirect them. Well, that's what I like here. If someone has passion, may not always be in agreement with me, but if they have the passion, I know how to, I go, oh, okay, they're going to do the right thing. Okay, so passion is a big thing. Their knowledge of government. And you mentioned, are they constitutionalists? Absolutely constitutionalists. Why? Because that's where our inherent rights are. They're all there. They come from God. They're there cemented. When people want to change that Constitution, I say no. It's worked for over 200 years. Why do we want to change it now? Even the people that want to do an amendment, I say no. We don't need that right now. What we need to do is enforce the rights that we have. Make sure people aren't abusing them, and we know they are. I look for an extrovert person because we elect a representative. That means they're a voice. Now, we do that diplomatically, but sometimes you have to say no. You have to stand up and, like the governor, and say, "Governor, I'm sorry, but I oppose you. I'm not going to do that. I vote no, and here's why." And I can tell you, on the personal side, I've had an 8-1 on the city of Muskegon when I was the city commissioner, and on a first reading, they were, and I don't mean to belabor, but it was first reading. It has to be unanimous. In the meantime, while that was the 2 weeks before it comes up again, I lobbied every commissioner to understand that what they were seeing and how they were seeing it incorrectly. The next time it came up, it was a 9-0 vote. The city attorney said to me, "I'm glad that someone was awake, because it would have devastated a community, because people think that it's just a vote. It has no outcomes and it has no consequences. Every vote has an outcome. You need to understand what those consequences are." And they don't do it. And you mentioned earlier about at the state level or at the federal level, that's some of what you're seeing, because these people learned that at a very low level and then carried it on through, and they don't think about what the outcomes are. And the guys like me become disturbed because we follow it. So hence, some of the activism you're seeing on my part is to look at an organization. How do we structure it such that we can vet these people at a very, very low level and follow them for long periods of time? And then also, it's a necessity to have a checks and balance. I always like to go back to that, to the Constitution, to that we develop checks and balance right from the beginning. I know I deviated from a little bit, but you get an idea what I'm looking at when I look at a candidate. You mentioned conservative, Bill. I'd like to divide that if I can, because some people say, "Well, I'm a conservative." Well, do they mean social or do they mean fiscal? I like to know both, because you can be a fiscal conservative but not a social conservative. So I want to know, I want the person being both. And then I want to make sure the highest ethical standards, because that's important.
Absolutely.
And what do I mean by ethics? Here's a real good, I'll give you a personal example. On Norton Shores Council, they gave a ticket to the theater, to the movie theater. Unlimited use, meaning a guest. If I took that, it was given, it's perfectly legal, but I didn't take it. I cut it up 3 years in a row. Not because anybody's looking at me, but because if I did that, if an issue came before me, did I vote on the issue on its merit, or did I vote because someone gave me a gift? And so often I see people getting gifts. And I got to tell you, it does make me upset. I don't believe that we should get anything above and beyond what your normal salary may be for that job, whether it be $40 a month like it was Norton Shores, or I think it was $2,000 on City of Muskegon for the year. But it shouldn't be above that, because you're not doing it for that reason. You're doing it for civic duty. And it's more of a what they call them, not fee. I want to say, not a more, I can't even remember what they call it, an honorarium. It's more of an honorarium fee. So anyways, I hope
that's all really good. And I'm going to make one more statement here, and then I'm going to, rather than conclude this early, or as I was going to, I've asked Steve Houston to continue co-hosting with Chris, who's at the other computer. So he's agreed to do that, and so I'm just going to put this in his court in just a minute as I go off to do the meditation at this funeral service. But it's really been special to have you with us. And you have not disappointed. You're really laying out some important things. But I want to just say in review again, ivoter.com. If any of you are willing, this would be another. Do you have passion for it? Are you willing to do something that really isn't necessarily all that attractive, but it's a way of helping to make a difference to discern between different candidates. And so if you will email me at bjohnson@americandecency.org, I'll put you in touch with that individual, and they can tell you more about it. And secondly, don't forget the special meeting, the prayer meeting time that we're going to have a week from this Thursday at 7 p.m. right here. I think that'll be a very special time. Anyway, as flipping this over, as Steve comes on board as a co-host with Chris, I'd like you, just like you gave the example about you turned away tickets that you were a city councilman, that you could have taken these tickets, instead you tore them up. And sometimes there are opportunities to go on big trips, even across the ocean. Talk about that for a little bit. And with that, I'm going to step out, and it'll give Steve a chance to listen to you, and then he will be your questioner going forward. Bless you all.
All right.
Next Thursday on the Zoom, and then in the evening. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Chuck. We'll be in touch.
All right. All right. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay. Steve, you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now to follow up on what Bill said, what he wanted to explain a little bit more. Well, when we talk about gifts or gratuities, it's one of the things that really bother me. My wife, being a nurse practitioner, they were allowed to do that, and doctors, okay? That has subsequently been changed. The state changed it, the state law. Interesting enough, they changed it for the professionals, which I think was right. However, they still leave it for themselves to do that. They're able to take these gratuities, these trips. And in our own race, that happened. And it's what really got me going, because it said, you're not entitled to that. And the one trip that they did, after 4 of them, the one trip they did was out to Hawaii as part of the group that wants to do away with electoral college, called NPV, National Popular Vote. Now, that goes against the Constitution, number one. But number two is that the fact that they took and went on that trip and paid for by, they'll say, oh, not a lobbyist, it's a special interest. I said, distinguish the difference between the two for me, please, because they are the same. And if it's not a lobbying firm, then how is it they're operating in this state without being registered? That means they're illegal. So I kind of pinned them down a little bit. But the point is, when you take a civil job or a job in government like this to represent us, it doesn't entitle you to those things. For example, you can look at the background. I was vice president in aerospace. You couldn't buy a government person a meal, nor could they. That was an agreement. You couldn't take gratuities. You couldn't do any of that. Why? Because that would be like bribes. Okay, so that wasn't allowed. Well, that should be the same way here, because these lobbyists are lobbying the legislature for a reason. They don't do that because they're nice guys. They've got a lot of other things they can do. They're doing it because they want to influence how they vote. And how they vote affects us. Now, sometimes it's aligned, but sometimes not. And that's what really isn't right, isn't fair. So the thing about the Norton Shores, I think I discovered that, and these guys take trips. That's not fair because, and you don't, unless you dig, you can't find it out readily because we don't have a way of doing that. If you go on to Michigan mivotes.org, I think it is, and you look at, you can put in the name of the legislator and you can find out anything that they're doing bill-wise and stuff, and you can look at it. But you can't always find out about trips unless you hear it and then Google it or have another means of doing it. It's just not available. So I'll leave it at that. Any questions?
Yeah. And I'm really glad to hear that you don't take gifts or you didn't take gifts and that you stand that way. The Bible very clearly tells us there's a danger in doing that. And of course, the Bible should always be our guide.
Exactly.
You had commented about making sure someone is a social conservative and a fiscal conservative. We can look at how someone votes to know where they stand in that way. Many people will claim to be conservative. Are there any questions that we can ask of those entering the race or even of incumbents that would give us a more clear picture as to whether they are truly social conservatives and fiscal conservatives or not?
Go right to the Bible. Go right to the Bible. You will know by chatting with them on the Bible, are they a social conservative or not, just by their viewpoint. And there's a lot of different areas you can ask them on. You can ask them on family life. Just that in general will bring it out. How are they? What's their view on life? And it's always fun. Talk about what do they do when they're in, say they're already a current legislator. I would ask them in times of stress, what do you turn to? Where do you go when you're really stressed? What do you do? Where do you turn to for advice? Who do you go to? What item do you go to? I'm looking for them to tell me, very biblically based, that they're going to read in the Bible. Just as an example, someone died and I wanted to console them in a way. It was a father, and I didn't want to offend. So where do you go? You go in the Bible and you look at a passage and you want to find out what's the meaning of that, so you can give some sympathy. And when I'm personally in stress or whatever, and I really want to, I'll do the same. But another side is I'll call my minister up. My minister and I will text back and forth, and just kind of funny like that. That's really that relationship. We need that. So I'd ask that person, what's your relationship with your minister? Besides having a relationship with God, but what's your relationship with your minister? Why do I ask that? That would tell me whether they're a regular attendee or are they just showing up.
Right. Those are all very good questions, and I thank you for pointing us to that. We talked earlier, you and Bill talked earlier about U.S. representatives like Jim Jordan and Louis Gohmert and how they stand out and actually above the crowd. And you talked about some of the things that mark them. And I'm wondering, isn't it possible for us to have state representatives that can be strong representatives for the people like a Jim Jordan or Louis Gohmert?
Absolutely. The training ground is there. Louis Gohmert came out of Texas, and of course Jim Jordan out of Ohio. They didn't just start there. They came out of the same thing. That's the farm club. So they demonstrated those qualities back then, and they're continuing now. Or you can look at Trey Gowdy in the same way, or a number of them. You just know that they were that way when they were holding state offices. So it becomes incumbent upon us. That's why I talk about on the local level as well. It starts here. It starts with the planning commission. It starts with the school board. When we think about school boards, these people come out of school boards and we see what's happening, or we see out of college, on a college board, on a board of education, you see the same thing, or board of regents. So we have to do a better job at those positions that we think are not so meaningful, but they are. Excuse me for a minute. Sorry, I had to cough. But they're very meaningful. They're the basis. They're the foundation. If the foundation is weak, if you build it on sand, you know what happens.
Exactly.
So that's really important that we build it on rock. How do we build it on rock? We start vetting these people better. I blame us, me included, that we haven't taken a strong enough stand. We haven't taken a strong enough stand for God either. I asked my minister 2 weeks ago, I said, Ben, where's the church been in all this? Where are we? Where's the body of Christ out there saying, Whitmer, you're wrong. Governor, you're wrong. Life is precious, whether it's unborn or the elderly. It doesn't matter. It's all through the gamut, the whole spectrum. Yet we didn't do that. But wow, sorry, I'm dry. But we have an obligation to stand up for what we believe. The people in these positions, we have to encourage them. We have to nurture them, if you will. When we send them off, it can't be like we're sending them off to college, like our kids, and then not follow up on them. We have to follow up on it and say, hey, what's going on this? I don't understand this bill. And I got to tell you this, I do that, and I don't like what I get back, whether it's from the state senator or the state representative. Oftentimes, it's not correct. And so what do we do with that? That becomes more of an issue. How do we correct that early on before it becomes a bill and have to try to redo it? So we do that with good candidates. We do that with candidates that we vetted. We do that with a list of qualities that we're able to be able to assess. And then there's one that we didn't talk about, and that is gut feeling. What does your gut tell you? Because your gut is really a assimilation of all those characteristics taken as a whole. And then, of course, you pray about it. So when you look at that as a whole, that's how we get to there. But I got to tell you this, and Bill and I have talked about it. With the iVoter Guide, I looked at it, and when you don't do things thorough enough, it brings into question your very your organization. It brings you into question. I'm an auditor. In my early days, I used to audit quality systems, and organization. I could tell you what that organization was in the first 5 minutes. I could tell you whether they're legitimate or not. Well, the same way, I go and look at, I use it like a baseline person and how they rate them, someone I know, and I look at the rating. If that rating in that is extremely low, I'll say, wait a minute, why is that bias? So what you need to do is validate, and you do this by validating the surveys. I can probably tell you that probably 90% or more of your surveys are not validated. And there's a way to ensure that the results you get are the results that you think that you wanted.
And that's important.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. It's when you do a doctoral, when you do your doctorate, those are some of the things you have to do. You have to validate your survey to ensure that the research you do then is credible, is actually truthful. Because otherwise, yeah, you'll do well at it, but it may not be really what you wanted.
Right. We've talked about these state representatives and how they can be strong representatives for the people. Can you think of any that come to mind right now that we have in office?
Well, I think of a Shane Hernandez. I know Shane. I met Shane, and he has been really solid. And I look at his background. He's running for U.S. rep right now, moving up, and we'll see how he's received. I want to follow him. Obviously, he's one. There's another in Matt Maddox. Although I got a couple of questions for Matt. He's been at my house with Pat Colbeck. I don't know if you know Pat Colbeck or not.
Yes, very well.
Oh, good. Pat and I are friends, by the way. So you know, if you haven't known that already, you know that now. Pat and I are rocket scientists too, and we laugh about that because when people talk about that, and I hosted Pat in my house when Pat was in Oceana County. We had the gathering here for Pat, and then have had 2 or 3 meetings with him down in Livingston County since then.
Great.
And so there are people out there. Yes, Pat Colbeck is one of them. I told Pat if he runs for governor, I'll run for lieutenant governor. And that is actually truthful, or serve in the administration in some way, because we need strong Christian people that are not, that are able to articulate, but not so much as a polished person, but actually a genuine. I grew up in a family of 7 kids, so you can get an idea. So I kind of understand that, but we have to be careful to meet to be able to reach out to everybody. It can't be too polished. It can't be too, down lower. So you got to be able to bridge that gap, so to speak.
Right.
You got to be Jesus. The bottom line is you got to be Jesus. You got to be able to meet the poor and be able to reach the rich.
Right. As we start to wind up, I've heard that you have a burden to start an organization that will vet local candidates for office in regards to local politics. And
Right.
I'd like you to tell us about that, and why do you see this as being so needed?
Well, when I look, obviously my background is in organizational development, so you get a good, quick feel for what I do. I've done a multitude of things. I actually was said, hey, you want to go restructure Magna across the country with my old boss. I said, well, I'll tell you tomorrow, but I couldn't. My wife would divorce me, and I don't blame her. I've been married 40 years, so you get an idea. So that didn't go over too well. So I thought, okay, forget that. So I didn't do it. But organizational development is really what I'm into. And when I look at the local level, and I look at the county, and I look at the state, I see very weak individuals. And I'll give you an example. Recently, I'm on the board of canvassers. I'm the chairman. I appeared before the county board of commissioners. And I got to tell you this, I hope if some are listening, I'll apologize, but they're rather weak. And not rather, they are weak comparatively. And the gentleman came from the medical care facility and gave a presentation, but no numbers, no PowerPoints, nothing. And here I come as just the board of canvassers, and I've got 15 slides, and I look around, and then I see. So the point I make is we have to do a better job of getting better candidates, but also vetting them. So we have twofold. And in the rural type areas, you don't have those type of individuals. You're going to have to groom them. You're going to have to grow them, and you're going to have to monitor them, because it is pretty weak. So to get them where we need them to be our representatives and be able to fight, they need an armor. They need the armor of God, but they need a lot of skill sets. So I see a big challenge here to do that. I don't know specifically yet how I'm going to do it. I'm just, right now, I'm running a campaign. While we speak, I'm running a state rep campaign for a friend. And at the same time, I'm also looking ahead to say, I want this organization to be credible beyond a shadow of doubt. I don't want there be any doubt to what we need to do and how we're doing it. And that's kind of how I do things, right? It speaks for itself. So when we look at it, I want to have a checks and balance. I want to be able to say, if you're liberal, you can find out if we rated you as a liberal or not, and why. You know what I mean? Or a conservative, are you social conservative, or are you a fiscal conservative? Really get into the nuts and bolts of who you are and why. Do I have all the specifics? No, but I've got an idea. I have this drive to make it. And anyone that knows me usually know that I usually fulfill it. I usually get this idea, and then I go do it. And if you ask why I didn't run for state rep again when I lost at a 4.75%, it's because I made a promise to my wife I would stay out until the kids were done. And I did. But I did go to political leadership program for a year after that. And then I went on to a master's and doctorate. So you get an idea of what I did.
Right.
So it's a big challenge. And I think that it's a challenge that's needed. And it's part of serving others, though. In terms of myself, I'm old enough where I can just say, hey, I've had my fill and retire. But at the same time, if you really want to, and my wife always pushes this on me, we talk about the parable of the talents. What do you want to be, the person that buries the talents, Or do you want to be the person that goes out and uses the talents, which is what God wants you to do for the betterment of the body? And that's really true. And we've had numerous discussions about that one, because I always thought, well, it'd be better if you buried it, because you're not gaining interest. You're not, but reality is you're not helping anybody either.
Right.
So I don't know. I hope that helps. I hope you guys get a little bit about what I'm about, what I'm doing, and why. The why is real simple. There is no benefit to me, no financial gain, lots of time. The gain would be knowing that we're getting good governance. Good governance, not good politics. Good politics, that doesn't do any good. Good governance is what it's about.
That's so true. And is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we close?
Well, I think you guys talked about the first question. I think why voter turnouts were for primaries so typical low. There's so many reasons. I mean, I went through a complete list of those. But one of the big things is that, people the time of year, people are working outside for vacations, but it's not promoted by either party, on the forefront, unless there's a specific issue. It doesn't get the publicity, if you will. And there's apathy in politicians right now because they're not delivering. They say one thing, they do another. So why would the general public be inclined to vote? They don't see the necessity, although they complain about things not getting better. But the reality is they're not exercising their vote either. And so that's some of the problems. But yeah, so anyways, I appreciate you guys hosting me today, and I apologize for being late. I got to get Zoom loaded again, because we've had it on here talking to my daughter's exchange student, and they were in Spain, and so we were talking back and forth, so through Zoom.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us, and we're thankful that you shared your expertise with us, and we look forward to having a conversation again with you sometime. I was wondering if I could ask you to close in prayer, and if you would particularly be praying for the elections, and that God would raise up godly leaders, and as you feel led to pray.
Yep. Absolutely.
Thank you.
If you're ready, I'm more than happy. All right. Dear Lord, thank you for the meeting today of gathering of Christians, of faithful followers, and we ask that thou be with each and every one as we lead this meeting. May we do things today, go and do things in thy name and glory. We ask that thou will pray for those in leadership roles, touch their hearts and touch their minds. May they be brought closer to you. We know that you are working in every one of us. We just want you to guide us in so many ways and help us as we go forth. Help us in that putting on the armor of God, and may we do it with glory and dignity. We pray that this day, we ask that thou be with us in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks again, Chuck, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you again later. And everyone, please join us next Thursday, 1:00.